Back when I was 12, I went to a private school, so I needed to take a long walk to my apartment since the school was a bit far from the city center. This was in Croatia, so I had a lot of public transport options to get home. My usual routine was to get on the bus to the station in front of my school, all the way down to the main street, then take a tram to a public park and walk home the rest of the way. Our school had a double timetable where one week we went to school in the morning and the other week we had classes in the afternoon. This happened during one of my afternoons. I was walking out with a few classmates since we all got on the same bus to the main street. The rest of my classmates were picked up by their parents. When we got on the bus, there were a few empty seats, so I took a seat in front of a balding middle-aged man who was wearing slightly dirty clothes. That was my mistake. As soon as I sat down, he started staring at me, like staring with a cold look in his eyes. Feeling uncomfortable, I took a book out of my bag and started reading. I would have used my phone if I could, but it was dead since I forgot to charge it before I left the house that day. The guy did not stop staring at me the whole bus ride, to the point where I couldn't even concentrate on my book. But I refused to put it down because I was scared. I would have mentioned something to my classmates, but we were all spread out on the bus, and I was too scared to move. I don't know why, but I didn't want him to see that I was scared, thinking that maybe that would deter him. Or maybe I thought he was just staring at me for some stupid reason. When we finally got to our stop, my classmates and I all got off, and some of us headed to the tram station while the others walked away to their houses. The guy who was staring at me also got off with us, and he started tailing us while keeping a fair distance. I told one of my friends about this, but urged him to not look back, thinking ignoring him would be the best option. When we got to the station, different people got on different trams, since each of them had a different route. I needed to take tram number 2, so did my friend. We waited for it to arrive, and the guy was somewhere to our right, but we refused to look at him. When our tram arrived, my friend and I got on, but so did the creepy guy. When I arrived at my stop, I tried to quietly discuss with my friend about getting off with me, just in case. But then we saw the guy get off himself first and started heading into the park, opposite where I needed to go. He probably overheard us talking since there were barely any people in the tram at the time. It was around 9 p.m. But I didn't think of that, so I thought it had all been a misunderstanding. When I got off and the tram had sped away to the next station, I started walking home. It was a short distance and would have taken me about 5 minutes, but then I noticed someone following me. I immediately knew it was the same guy again, so I picked up my pace and walked to my apartment. As I turned a corner into the alley that housed my apartment, the guy was getting closer. I got to the building and buzzed my mom on the intercom. I wish she would hurry up. But in the end, the guy managed to catch up with me. I could smell the stench coming off him as he started talking. "Hey, how you been, buddy? I saw your dad yesterday and he told me all about how you were getting on in that new school of yours." And then I immediately knew he was lying, since my dad had been away on work-related business for months and hadn't returned home in that time once. I didn't know what to do, so I just stood there quietly staring at him. Just then, the door buzzed and unlocked, so I bolted for it. I managed to rush in and start running up the stairs, but he was falling behind me, running himself. Never in my life have I felt such an adrenaline rush as I ran up the stairs to the 3rd floor. And I had a backpack with books weighing me down, so I had a disadvantage. But in the end, I managed to arrive at our door, where my mom was happily waiting for me. With no warning, I shoved her away from the door as I entered before slamming it shut. Fortunately, the guy had enough common sense not to continue chasing after me. I told my mom what had happened and she called the police, and they arrived some time later, questioning me on how the guy looked and what exactly happened. In the end, they looked at the camera footage, but since it was so dark out and I didn't turn on the indoor building lights as I entered, they weren't able to get a clear view of his face. For 2 weeks, I was too scared to go home alone, so my mom picked me up every time, until 2 weeks later, when on the news it was said how a man was arrested for the attempted kidnapping of children, and the face they showed was the exact one I saw that night. So I finally breathed a sigh of relief, knowing I was safe for now. But that didn't excuse the fact that I was careless with not charging my phone. There were still so many people out there. Everyone, please stay safe out there. Last summer, I was almost kidnapped. I usually walk around my neighborhood, sometimes biking, but mostly on foot. As I was walking, listening to music, a car pulled up beside me. Since I was near someone's house, I didn't think much of it and assumed it was their house they were pulling up to. But I was wrong. Just to give you an idea of the difference in size between me and this man, I stand at 5 feet 115 pounds, while he looked to be around 6'3", 180 pounds. As he came out of his car, he started a conversation with me. He asked, "Where are you headed?" I responded with a short, "Just walking around." He then said, "It's pretty late. Want me to give you a ride home?" I declined, saying, "No thanks, I don't live in this area." After I made this statement, he looked at me and asked why I was walking alone. I simply ignored him and quickened my pace, causing him to speed up as well. Eventually, I came across a house with its garage open. Without thinking, I ran in seeing an older man sitting there. I told him that someone was following me and to please help. He got up and started yelling at the man following me, telling him to fuck off and saying that he had a gun. The man retreated back to his car and sped off. I thanked the garage man, and he told me to stay safe. That night, I ran as fast as I could back to my house. I'm not sure if this is going to be that interesting of a story, since it happened at such a young age, that the story had to be relayed to me through family. When I was around 2 years old, me and my sister were at our aunt's house. My mom, me and my sister were outside in the front yard, and she said she needed to go inside for something, and left my sister outside with me. My sister was about 6 at the time, and should never have been put in charge of a baby. Anyway, during the time she had left, and it was just the two of us outside, apparently someone had grabbed me, and no one noticed until my mom came back out, and I was nowhere to be seen. They immediately freaked out, and my uncle had been driving around the area searching for me. He had a feeling about who he knew it was, and was on the verge of breaking into the guy's house, because he banged on his door multiple times and was ignored. My aunt must have talked him out of it, because they ended up just going back home and calling the police. When the cops got there, they drove around and ended up finding me multiple blocks away. Just standing outside, the very house my uncle said was the guy. They never made any arrests on the guy, and I don't even think they questioned him. My family says that they think once he heard the sirens coming, he panicked and just left me outside to be found, because there was no way a baby that just recently started walking could have wandered that far off on my own. So the guy who kidnapped me and left me on the side of the road, that's not me ever again. This happened approximately 10 years ago, around 2015 to 2016. I was living with someone at the time who worked on an opposite schedule as me. He worked graveyard and I worked during the day. So when I was getting up to get ready to leave for work, he was just coming home. On the nights during the week, I obviously would be at home by myself. One night during the week, I was feeling especially lonely, and my favorite toy unfortunately broke and died. So I decided to drive downtown to the 24-hour adult store to buy another one. The town I live in is a mid-sized suburban town filled with mostly residential areas. The main downtown area was essentially one small area on the way to the freeway. My apartment was 10 minutes away. I pulled into the parking lot behind the adult store. The parking lot was dark and had multiple entries all around that led to the bars and restaurants, as well as the store. After parking my car, I walked towards the entrance, which was on the street. Upon walking to the entrance, I noticed a man standing by himself smoking a cigarette. It was 1 a.m. and it was not normal just to see only one person standing by themselves, though I figured he was one of the patrons from one of the bars on the block taking a cigarette break. As I walked past him, he said, "Hi," to which I responded with a quiet, "Hi," but didn't make eye contact with the man. Upon passing him, I had a better look at his appearance. He had a shaved head and wore a long white t-shirt with shorts hanging past his knees. He had on a pair of sneakers accompanied with some tube socks that covered his shins. This is not unusual to see in my town, but I was more concerned that he was sitting by himself and instantly took an interest in me as I walked past him. After passing him and continuing to walk to the store, I saw out of the corner of my eye. The man proceeded to follow behind me. When I say follow, I don't mean he coincidentally was walking behind me. He immediately followed right behind me as soon as I passed him, making a point to maintain the same walking speed. I didn't know this man's intentions, but a man by himself that late at night is a recipe for trouble. As I looked down the dark and empty street, I weighed out my options of where to go. Initially I thought, keep walking so he doesn't know you're going to the adult store. But since it was 1 a.m. and there was no one on the street, I thought that to be more dangerous. Then I thought, just go in one of the bars. But then I thought that would give him an easier introduction to approach me. So then I realized my best bet was to continue into the store, where I knew was well lit and people who could see me. I proceeded to shop for what I came there for. The man entered the store behind me, but hung out at the front of the store so as to not look like he was following me around. He wasn't even pretending to shop. He literally just sat at the front waiting. As I was shopping, I heard the man make a "st" sound, to which I ignored. He wasn't getting the message. He continued making that sound as I continued to shop without noticing. Eventually, I walked up to the cashier, who was completely oblivious to what was going on. I tried to whisper to the cashier, "Do you know that man? Or does he work here?" The cashier asked me to repeat what I was saying. I asked again, but still spoke in a quiet voice. Not understanding my attempt to be discreet, the cashier responded, "I can't hear you. Say it again." At this point, I felt my cover was blown, so in a more normal tone, I told the cashier the man in the front followed me from outside and won't leave me alone. I explained my car was parked in the lot behind the store and I didn't feel comfortable going to my car. The cashier walked to the front by where the man was and, from behind the counter, told the man to leave. He then came up and assured me he told the man to go away. Though the man did not in fact go away, he continued to stay there. Given that I didn't want him to follow me to my car, I stayed in the store and pretended like I was still shopping, even though I already found what I came for. I would occasionally glance to the front to see if the man was still there, and he was. I kept going up to the cashier, explaining that the man hasn't left. So he went back up to the front to talk to him. I heard the cashier say, "Enough already, just leave the store." While he was doing this, I went to the far back end of the store to remain out of sight. By the time I circled back to the cashier, I noticed the man was no longer in the store. The cashier said that he repeatedly, more assertively told the man to leave. He said the man claimed he didn't understand English. The cashier then said he pulled a baton he kept under the counter for protection, held it over his head, and asked the man, "Do you understand this?" To which the man finally left the store. I made my purchase, but was still worried about walking to my car, even though I was parked in one of the first spaces when you came through the driveway. The cashier pointed at a small TV behind him that had 4 angles of CCTV footage. He assured me the man was gone and if I saw him to come back in the store. He also said he will see me when I walk to the car. Even though I would have felt more comfortable with him walking me, I understood he was by himself and couldn't leave the store unattended with customers. After making my purchase, I speed walked to my car. I always have my keys at the ready when walking to my car, so I promptly pressed unlock on my car remote, got in the car, placed my bag of purchases on the passenger seat, and proceeded to start the car. Once my car turned on, I took off the e-brake, put the car in reverse, and while putting on my seatbelt, I looked in my side view mirror to back out. It was at this point that I saw that same man in the mirror, full on speed walking right to my driver's side door. I was driving an Accord at the time, and that model automatically locks all the doors when you take the car out of park. As soon as I saw him, I hit the gas and violently pulled out of my parking space. I pulled out so fast, it startled him and stopped him dead in his tracks. He was now standing right next to my driver's side door as I continued to pull out. I gave him the most serious dead stare I could, because I know most predators prey on the fear of their victims. The stare must have worked. As soon as he saw me pull out while staring at him, he turned his head back to the driveway entrance and proceeded to walk back to where he was standing. He had a look of defeat on his face. My face, however, was overcome with relief. I pulled out of the parking lot and took myself back home. I felt a bit of shame being by myself going out so late. I did tell my boyfriend about the incident when he came home at 6 a.m. He also concurred that me going out that late by myself wasn't the smartest thing. I'm no longer with that person, but still live in the same town, though I never leave my home for anything past 9 o'clock anymore. While the town I live in isn't the most dangerous, there still are enough crimes that occur here. It's also not considered the safest.